I'm Rebecca. I'm here on the channel teaching myself how to play the violin again after walking away from music 25 years ago. I recently completed my first 6 months of playing, and I kept a diary of the ups and downs that came with that experience. Here are some of my notes along with the music that I've played in recent weeks. April 24th, 2021. I woke up extraordinarily cranky today. I've made a lot of headway on the violin this week. My fingers are back. Somehow I remember this feeling, being so cranky from when I played before. I wonder if cranking up your capabilities has something to do with it. I spent the morning reviewing research on how music education and specifically violin training changes the brain. It turns out there's a ton of research on the neuroscience in that area, complete with MRIs to prove it. Learning the violin specifically seems to alter and expand the structure that connects the hemispheres, as well as the temporal and prefrontal structures and really the overall cortex. It's interesting because my desire to play again kicked in early in the pandemic when I started listening to some of the literature I used to play. I felt like the motor cortex had kicked in while I was listening. According to one study, it probably did. At Duke University a few years ago, a doctor ordered an MRI on an accomplished violinist who had lost the ability to play after a concussion. During an MRI, she listened to pieces she had played, and the test showed activity in the motor cortex. For me, listening to the old concertos during the quiet period of the pandemic no doubt fired sequences in that cortex, and the time in lockdown gave me the time and space to activate them as well. If only I could pursue this kind of mind expansion without being so damn cranky. Here's a piece I played after 3 months of practice. It's a famous waltz by Shostakovich. May 10th, 2021. I've wondered about my decision to bleed off so much energy in rewriting the Tchaikovsky in the last couple of weeks. I was going to play an easy selection from Swan Lake from my easy violin book. Then, while I was listening to Swan Lake, the YouTube algorithm kicked out the waltz from the ballet and it sent chills up my spine. Well, I had to play it. I pulled the violin part from the full score and it didn't work very well for solo violin. I started revising it. The project turned into this madcap thing with me sawing apart pieces of the score, then putting it back together in new ways and hand scoring transitions to get it all to work. I worked all the way through dinner one night just to jot down ideas for the ending. I stopped at the point that I found myself trying to transcribe the big brass part at the end from the bass clef. Too much. So I winged it and it worked out pretty well. Why on earth was I doing this when my living room is stacked full of newly ordered sheet music? I stepped back for a couple of days and thought about it. The whole thing had to do with taking ownership of the music on my own terms. It all made sense when I watched a video from Two Set Violin, the famous YouTube violin guys. They were talking about the common phenomenon of mental and physical breakdowns in classical violinists, particularly when they're facing juries and big auditions in college. They mentioned their own struggles as well as horrific stories about breakdowns among students that they had known. Things kind of fell into context for me. First of all, I feel like I absolutely dodged a bullet by not majoring in music. Whenever I didn't want to be pushed by teachers and conductors into crazy feats in music school, I would just shrug and say, well, I'm not a music major. I feel like that's the reason I was able to stay in music at all. If music had been the focus of my life, I would have died from the isolation and the rigid standards of perfection. Music school is spent sealed off in a room with your vicious inner critic. Journalism school was nowhere near as demanding. In terms of standards, learning curve, and performance, it was pretty lame, to be honest. Sure, lots of people became overwhelmed and dropped out along the way, but it was nothing like music school. That brings me back to those crazed sessions revamping the Tchaikovsky last week. I did it because I wanted to play it and I didn't want to kill myself to do it. I chopped out the stuff that I wasn't ready to play, the escalating chromatic runs, the peak at the upper registers, and I left the beauty of the piece in place. I kept the beauty without the trials. In a run through today, it sounded pretty good. Here's a snippet of that waltz.